The Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, what do they all have in common? American weapons, American training, American money. Every single one of them received support from Washington before they became the enemy. America built the enemies. It now spends trillions fighting. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is the documented, declassified, publicly available record of American foreign policy, and the pattern never stops. Fund the rebels today, fight the terrorists tomorrow. Arm a dictator this decade, invade his country the next. Fund, arm, fight, repeat. It's a cycle so predictable, so consistent, that calling it a mistake insults your intelligence. Because mistakes happen once, maybe twice. But when the same playbook runs for 70 years across 3 continents, that's not incompetence. That's policy. Today, we're going to trace every thread, every dollar, every weapon. From the moment America decided to play God with the world, to the moment those creations turned around and bit back. And by the end, you'll understand why the war on terror can never be won. Because you can't win a war against something you keep creating. The Afghan blueprint. Let's start where the modern nightmare began. Afghanistan, 1979. The Soviet Union invades, and Washington sees an opportunity, not to save the Afghan people, to bleed the Soviets. We didn't push the Russians to intervene, but we knowingly increased the probability that they would. That's Zbigniew Brzezinski, Carter's national security advisor, admitting it years later with zero shame. Operation Cyclone became the CIA's largest covert program. Between 1979 and 1992, the United States funneled over $3 billion to the Afghan mujahideen. Billions. They sent Stinger missiles that could shoot down Soviet helicopters. They sent training manuals printed at the University of Nebraska. They sent money through Pakistan's ISI intelligence service, which skimmed its share and funneled the rest to the most radical factions. Not the moderate ones, the extremists, because extremists fight harder. Among those receiving American support was a young Saudi volunteer named Osama bin Laden. The man who would later orchestrate the deadliest attack on American soil was once an asset in America's proxy war. The Soviets withdrew in 1989. America declared victory and walked away. No reconstruction, no plan, just a destroyed country full of armed radicals with nowhere to aim their anger next. But this was just the beginning of the pattern. Saddam's friendship. While the CIA was arming the mujahideen in Afghanistan, they were simultaneously propping up another future enemy just next door, Saddam Hussein. In 1980, Iraq invaded Iran, and America loved it. Iran had just humiliated Washington with the hostage crisis, and Saddam was the perfect instrument of revenge. Weapons, money, intel. The Reagan administration removed Iraq from the state sponsors of terrorism list in 1982. Not because Iraq stopped sponsoring terrorism, but because America needed Iraq to fight Iran. Donald Rumsfeld himself flew to Baghdad in December 1983 to shake Saddam's hand and discuss military cooperation. The same Donald Rumsfeld who would later oversee the invasion of Iraq 20 years later. The handshake that launched 1,000 contradictions. America provided Saddam with satellite intelligence, dual-use technology, agricultural credits that freed up cash for weapons, and looked the other way when he used chemical weapons against Iranian soldiers and Kurdish civilians. If you're starting to see the pattern, hit like and subscribe to keep exposing what they hide, because what comes next connects all the dots. When Saddam invaded Kuwait in 1990, suddenly the same man America had armed for a decade became the new Hitler. The cycle turned, and the bombs started falling on the very infrastructure American money had helped build. Blowback doctrine. The CIA has a word for this. Blowback. It's the term intelligence agencies use when covert operations produce unintended consequences that come back to haunt the country that launched them. Blowback is a CIA term, first used in a classified report on the 1953 Iranian coup. And blowback isn't an accident, it's a statistical certainty. When you arm, train, and fund violent groups in unstable regions, some of those weapons will eventually point back at you. Some of those trained fighters will find new enemies. Some of those funded organizations will evolve into something you never intended. Every weapon America exported became a bullet with a return address. But here's what makes it worse. The people who designed these programs knew this would happen. The CIA's own internal assessments warned about long-term consequences. Congressional committees raised alarms. Intelligence analysts wrote memos. And every single time, the short-term strategic goal won. Beat the Soviets now, deal with the consequences later. Contain Iran now, worry about Saddam later. Short-term thinking, long-term suffering. The consequences always came. They just landed on different people. American soldiers, Afghan civilians, Iraqi families, and the taxpayers who funded both the arming and the fighting. The same wallet, emptied twice. And speaking of wallets, there's someone who profits every single time this cycle repeats. Who profits? Follow the money. It always tells the truth. In 2001, Lockheed Martin's stock traded around $40 a share. By 2020, it was over 360. Profit. Raytheon, Boeing, Northrop Grumman. Every single major defense contractor saw record profits during the War on Terror. And here's the part that should make your blood boil. These same companies lobby Congress to approve foreign arms sales. Those arms go to allies in unstable regions. Those allies lose control of those weapons. Those weapons end up in the hands of militants. 1. Defense companies lobby for arms sales. 2. Weapons flow to unstable regions. 3. Weapons fall into enemy hands. 4. New war is declared to fight those enemies. 5. Defense companies sell more weapons. The cycle is the product. War isn't a failure of policy. It's the business model working exactly as designed. The military-industrial complex doesn't want peace because peace is bad for quarterly earnings. Eisenhower warned about this in 1961. His farewell address explicitly cautioned against the growing influence of defense contractors on foreign policy. 60 years later, the defense budget exceeds $800 billion annually. That's more than the next 10 countries combined. And every dollar spent requires an enemy to justify it. No enemy means no budget, and no budget means no profit. So if enemies don't exist, you create them. And if they stop being useful, you create new ones. But the most chilling example of this cycle was still to come. Birth of Al-Qaeda. After the Soviets left Afghanistan, America packed up and went home. But the fighters America had trained didn't disappear. They organized, they networked, and they found a new purpose. Osama bin Laden took the skills, the contacts, and the ideology that had been useful to the CIA and built Al-Qaeda. Trained, funded, unleashed. Word Al-Qaeda means the base. And that base was built on the foundation America laid during the Afghan-Soviet War. The foreign fighters who flowed into Afghanistan during the 1980, encouraged and facilitated by the CIA and Saudi intelligence, became the core of a global jihadist network. When bin Laden declared war on America in 1996, he cited American military presence in Saudi Arabia as his primary grievance. American troops had been stationed there since the Gulf War against Saddam Hussein, another American creation turned enemy. We helped create the very people we would let us spend trillions trying to destroy. The irony is staggering. The Gulf War was fought to contain Saddam, whom America had armed. The troops stationed in Saudi Arabia after that war provoked bin Laden, whom America had supported. One intervention created the conditions for the next. Each solution manufactured the next problem. And then came September 11th, and the consequences of decades of manufactured chaos finally arrived on American soil. What followed was even more catastrophic. Iraq's collapse. September 11th, 2001. 3,000 Americans dead. The nation demanded justice, and the government delivered something else entirely. They used the grief of a nation to settle old scores and open new markets. Afghanistan was invaded first. That at least had a logical connection to Al-Qaeda. But then came Iraq. Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with September 11th. There were no weapons of mass destruction. Colin Powell stood before the United Nations with a vial of fake anthrax and intelligence that the CIA itself called unreliable. The entire justification for the Iraq War was built on fabrications presented as facts. But Saddam was invaded anyway. His government was toppled. His military was disbanded. And here's where the next enemy was born. Paul Bremer, the American administrator of occupied Iraq, issued Order No. 1, de-Baathification, which removed all members of Saddam's party from government jobs. Order number 2, dissolve the entire Iraqi military. Fired, armed, angry. Overnight, 400,000 trained soldiers with weapons and no income were dumped onto the streets of a destroyed country. They had the skills, they had the anger, they had the guns. All they needed was a leader and a cause, and both were about to arrive. Because the vacuum America created in Iraq would give birth to something even worse than Al-Qaeda. ISIS rises. The Islamic State didn't emerge from a vacuum. It was born in an American prison camp. Camp Bucca in southern Iraq held thousands of detainees. Sunni insurgents, former Iraqi soldiers, petty criminals, and jihadists, all crammed together. America didn't just create the conditions for ISIS, it built the incubator. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the future leader of ISIS, was detained at Camp Bucca and released in 2004. Inside those walls, he networked with former Ba'athist military officers who had the tactical expertise and radical Islamists who had the ideology. When they got out, they merged those two elements into the most effective terrorist organization the world had ever seen. If there was no American invasion of Iraq, there would be no ISIS. The disbanded Iraqi military officers brought organizational skill, intelligence training, and battlefield experience. The jihadists brought recruitment networks, religious motivation, and willingness to die. Creation. By 2014, ISIS controlled territory the size of Britain across Iraq and Syria. They had American Humvees, American rifles, American night vision equipment, all captured from the Iraqi army that America had rebuilt, equipped, and trained. Billions of dollars in American military hardware, now in the hands of the enemy America created. The cycle completed itself with terrifying precision. And yet, America was about to repeat the exact same mistake somewhere else. The Syria trap. When the Syrian civil war erupted in 2011, America saw another opportunity. Arm the rebels. Topple Assad. Sound familiar? The CIA launched Timber Sycamore, a billion-dollar program to train and equip moderate Syrian rebels. Moderate today, radical tomorrow. But here's the problem with arming people in a chaotic war zone. You can't control where the weapons go. A classified study by the military found that the CIA-supplied weapons were routinely ending up in the hands of al-Nusra Front, which was Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria. American weapons, flowing directly to the enemy America, was supposedly fighting. At one point, CIA-backed rebels and Pentagon-backed rebels were literally fighting each other in northern Syria. Two branches of the American government funding opposite sides of the same battle. It would be comedy if it weren't so deadly. The weapons, training, and money that flowed into Syria contributed to the destabilization that allowed ISIS to expand from Iraq into Syrian territory. The very program designed to counter extremism accelerated it. Timber Sycamore was eventually shut down in 2017, but the damage was done. Hundreds of thousands dead, millions displaced, and a new generation of fighters armed with American weapons and fueled by American intervention. The pattern never changes, only the geography does, and this pattern has roots much deeper than most people realize. Libya's lesson. Libya, 2011. Muammar Gaddafi had been a dictator for 42 years, but he was a contained dictator. Libya had the highest human development index in Africa, free healthcare, free education, no external debt. Then NATO intervened. They called it a humanitarian mission, but left behind a humanitarian catastrophe. Gaddafi was overthrown and brutally killed. And then, just like in Iraq, just like in Afghanistan, America walked away from the wreckage. Libya became a failed state overnight. The weapons from Gaddafi's massive arsenal flooded across North Africa and the Middle East. Libyan missiles ended up in Gaza. Libyan rifles ended up with Boko Haram in Nigeria. Libyan fighters joined ISIS in Syria. 1. NATO bombs Libya into regime change. 2. Gaddafi's weapon stockpiles go unguarded. 3. Arms flood to militants across Africa and Middle East. 4. New terrorist groups emerge with Libyan weapons. The intervention created exactly what it claimed to prevent. A breeding ground for extremism, a weapons supermarket for terrorists, and a migration crisis that destabilized Europe. We came, we saw, he died. She laughed when she said it. Nobody in Libya was laughing. The country that was once Africa's wealthiest is now a war-torn wasteland with open-air slave markets. And every weapon that left Libya found its way into someone else's war. But what if I told you the entire pattern is even older than you think? The eternal cycle. This pattern didn't start in Afghanistan. It started in Iran in 1953, when the CIA overthrew the democratically elected Prime Minister Mossadegh and installed the Shah. The Shah's brutality created the conditions for the 1979 Islamic Revolution. That revolution created the enemy America, then armed Saddam to fight. Overthrow, install, repeat. It happened in Guatemala, where a CIA coup in 1954 led to decades of civil war and the migration crisis that haunts America today. It happened in Vietnam, in Nicaragua, in El Salvador, in Chile. Every intervention planted seeds that grew into the next crisis. The pattern is always the same. Identify a short-term strategic interest. Arm or install someone willing to serve that interest. Ignore the long-term consequences. Then act surprised when those consequences arrive. It's not stupidity. It's not even arrogance. It's a system that rewards short-term thinking and punishes no one for long-term failure. The architects of disaster retire with pensions, while their creations terrorize the world. The generals get promotions. The contractors get rich. The politicians get re-elected. And 20 years later, a new generation of soldiers fights the enemies the last generation funded. The cycle doesn't break because too many powerful people benefit from it continuing. The question isn't whether it will happen again. It's where, and who will pay the price next. So here's the uncomfortable truth. America doesn't have an enemy problem. It has a creation problem. From the Mujahideen to Al-Qaeda, from Saddam to ISIS, from Libya's collapse to Syria's nightmare, the pattern is identical. Fund, arm, fight, repeat. Every intervention designed to solve a problem created two more. Every weapon shipped overseas eventually found its way back as a threat. Every dollar spent arming today's ally became the cost of fighting tomorrow's enemy. And the people who designed these policies never faced consequences. They wrote books. They gave lectures at universities. They collected consulting fees from the defense companies that profited from their decisions. War is a racket. It always has been. Smedley Butler said that in 1935. Nearly a century later, nothing has changed. The names change. The geography changes. The justifications change. But the cycle never stops, because the cycle is the point. The only thing that can break it is awareness. Understanding that every headline about a new threat should prompt one question: who armed them, and who profits from fighting them? If you made it this far, comment "funded enemies" to prove you see the pattern now. Every government lies. The question is, what are they lying about? The truth is out there. You just have to follow the money. Like and subscribe to keep digging where they don't want you to look.